in a world filled with distractions, noise, and the constant pull of our everyday routines. In the midst of all this, many wonder, how can I hear God clearly? How can I recognize his voice above the din of our busy lives? The answer lies in understanding and nurturing a relationship with him that goes far beyond rituals, following commands, or mere religious practices. First and foremost, it's essential to recognize that hearing God clearly begins with a relationship, not with religion. God desires to communicate with you just as a friend communicates with a friend. It's not about following a set of rules. It's about cultivating a deep personal connection. The more you invest in your relationship with God through prayer, time in his word, and simply being present with him, the more you'll be able to hear and recognize his voice in a world full of noise and constant activity. Silence is a rare commodity. But it is in moments of silence that we can truly hear God. To hear him clearly, you must create space in your life to be still. This doesn't always mean complete physical silence, but rather mental and spiritual quiet. Taking time to pause, reflect, and listen to his still, small voice is one of the most powerful ways to discern God's guidance. Another key to hearing God clearly is understanding your unique purpose. When you are aligned with your purpose, your life becomes a channel through which God speaks. Purpose brings clarity, and clarity helps you recognize when God is guiding you. When you are living in alignment with what you are meant to do, his voice becomes easier to discern because you are already attuned to his direction for your life. Listening to God is not just about hearing. God's instructions may come in small, quiet whispers, but they carry great power. The more we obey what God tells us, the more we position ourselves to hear him clearly. Every act of obedience brings us closer to his voice. The clearer the communication becomes and the greater the guidance he provides. Sometimes the challenge isn't hearing God's voice, but trusting in his timing. There will be times when you feel like he's silent or not responding in the way you expect. But trusting in God's perfect timing is an essential part of learning to hear him clearly. His ways are higher than ours, and his understanding surpasses our own. When we trust that he speaks at the right time, in the right way, and for the right purpose, hearing God clearly is not a one-time event. It's a journey of deepening relationship, quiet reflection, purposeful living, obedience, and trust. As you cultivate these practices in your life, you'll find that God's voice will become clearer, his direction more certain, and your walk with him more intimate. So I encourage you today, make room for silence, seek your purpose, and trust his timing. The clearer your connection with God, the clearer his voice will become. Hearing God clearly begins with recognizing that it is not about religion, rituals, or outward appearances. It's about cultivating a genuine relationship with him. Far too often, we get caught up in the outward expressions of faith, attending services, following rules, or doing good works. But these actions alone are not what connect us to God on a deeper level. It's easy to mistake religious activities as the primary way to connect with God, but in reality, God desires a personal, intimate relationship with each of us. Just as we value close relationships with friends and family, where communication flows freely and meaningfully, God wants the same with us. He wants us to talk to him as a child talks to a parent, as a friend confides in another, or as a lover shares with the one they cherish most. When we view our relationship with God as something personal and intimate, it changes the way we approach him. It becomes less about following a set of rules or doing things simply because we are told to, and more about desiring his presence in our lives. This shift in mindset allows us to recognize that God is not distant or disconnected from us, but is actively seeking us, wanting to speak to us and guide us every step of the way. The beauty of a relationship is that it's two-sided. Just as we desire to speak and share our hearts with God, He also longs to speak to us. This kind of relationship requires intentional time and effort, just as any meaningful relationship does. It's not about being perfect, it's about being present. When we invest time in prayer, in His Word, and in listening to Him, we begin to hear His voice more clearly. The more time we spend in His presence, the more attuned we become to His voice, and the clearer His communication becomes. In this relationship, we are not merely followers of a religion, but sons and daughters of God, deeply loved and cared for. And it is from this place of intimate connection that God's voice can be heard with clarity as He speaks directly to our hearts, guiding, comforting, and encouraging us through the ups and downs of life. In a world that is constantly buzzing with noise, whether it's the hum of technology, the clamor of social media, or the endless demands of daily life, silence has become a rare and precious commodity. Yet, it is in this silence that we can most clearly hear God. When our minds are filled with distractions and our hearts overwhelmed with busyness, it's easy to miss the subtle whispers of God's voice. Silence doesn't just refer to the absence of sound. It refers to creating an inner peace and space in our lives where we can tune in to the stillness required to hear from God. Just as a radio must be tuned to the right frequency to pick up a clear signal, we too must create a quiet space in our hearts and minds to hear God's voice without interference. The act of intentionally seeking silence allows us to detach from the noise and the constant stimulation around us. It's in these moments of quiet that we begin to hear God in ways we might otherwise miss. In the stillness, God can speak to us deeply, beyond the surface distractions, and His guidance becomes clearer. Silence enables us to slow down and listen, not just to our own thoughts, but to God's promptings. It's in this sacred space that we can experience His presence most fully, where we can reflect and wait patiently for His voice without feeling rushed or distracted. Hearing God requires us to step away from the familiar rhythms of life and create a peaceful, solitary moment. This silence allows us to hear not just with our ears, but with our hearts. It's a space where we can be vulnerable, open, and receptive to the wisdom He wants to impart to us. In the silence, we begin to differentiate between our own thoughts and the gentle nudge of God's voice. The more we embrace moments of quiet, the more we attune ourselves to His presence, making it easier to discern His leading in every aspect of our lives. As we become accustomed to this practice of silence, it will no longer feel like a rare or inconvenient thing, but a necessity that nurtures our ability to hear God clearly. When you understand your purpose, it becomes easier to recognize God's voice in your life. Purpose gives direction, and with direction comes clarity. God created each of us with a unique purpose, a divine calling that aligns with His greater plan for the world. When you are in tune with this purpose, you are more likely to discern when God is speaking to you, because His guidance will align with the path He has set for you. Purpose is not just about what you do, it's about who you are and why you are here. When you know your purpose, you are more attuned to the subtle ways God communicates with you, whether through thoughts, feelings, or circumstances. Understanding your purpose also allows you to filter the noise of life and separate it from the clarity of God's voice. When you are unsure of your purpose, it's easy to become distracted by external influences, other people's expectations, or the pressure to conform to society's standards. But when you have a clear sense of why you were created, you can confidently navigate life. knowing that the decisions and choices you make are in alignment with God's will. His voice becomes easier to hear because you are not clouded by confusion or uncertainty. Your purpose also brings focus to your relationship with God. As you seek to understand and walk in the purpose God has given you, you naturally position yourself to listen for His direction. God speaks clearly when you are aligned with His will. And purpose is the key to unlocking that clarity. It becomes a filter for understanding His guidance, because when you know your purpose, you can distinguish between the right choices and distractions that might pull you away from the path He has set for you. When purpose is understood, it serves as a foundation for hearing God's voice with precision. You become more intentional about seeking His direction because you understand that every decision, big or small, is part of fulfilling the purpose He has designed for your life. Therefore, aligning with that purpose makes it not only easier to hear God's voice, but to trust that He is always speaking to you, guiding you toward the fulfillment of your unique calling. Obedience is one of the most powerful keys to understanding God's voice more clearly. While hearing from God requires an open heart and a willingness to listen, it's the act of obeying that deepens our ability to understand His guidance. When God speaks to us, it's often an invitation to follow His lead, to step out in faith and to trust His wisdom over our own. Each time we obey, we not only demonstrate our trust in God, but we also create a deeper connection with Him. This connection in turn allows us to hear His voice more distinctly and more frequently. Obedience is not always easy, and often it involves stepping out of our comfort zones. There may be times when God's direction challenges our desires, our plans, or even our understanding of what's best for us. But when we choose to obey, despite the discomfort or uncertainty, we are positioning ourselves to experience God in new and profound ways. Obedience is not just about doing what God asks of us in the moment. It is about cultivating a heart that is willing to follow Him no matter the cost. With each act of obedience, we become more familiar with the way God speaks, because obedience opens our hearts to a deeper level of understanding. When we are obedient to what God has already revealed to us, He often gives us greater insight. It's as if He's waiting for us to respond to His current instructions before He reveals the next steps. In this way, obedience becomes a pathway to greater understanding. The more we obey, the more we learn to discern His voice, and the more we trust His timing and direction. This act of faith and trust allows God to speak more clearly to us because it aligns our hearts with His will. Obedience also reinforces our relationship with God. It shows that we are not merely hearing His voice, but are willing to act upon it. When we choose to obey, we move from being passive listeners to active participants in God's plan. This partnership with God strengthens our understanding of who He is and how He works in our lives. Each step of obedience brings us closer to knowing God more intimately and understanding His ways more fully. In essence, obedience not only confirms our faith, but also enhances our ability to hear and understand the guidance He provides. Faith and trust in God's timing are crucial when it comes to hearing His voice clearly. God's timing is often different from our own, and it can be difficult to understand why things don't unfold as quickly or in the way we expect. However, learning to trust in His perfect timing is essential for spiritual growth and for a deeper connection with Him. It requires surrendering our desire for immediate answers or quick results and embracing the truth that God sees the bigger picture, one that we may not fully understand in the moment. When we trust that God knows what is best and that His timing is flawless, we can have peace while we wait for His direction. At times it may seem like God is silent or that He is delaying His answers, and this can cause frustration or doubt. However, God's silence does not mean he is absent or inactive. Rather, it is often a sign that he is preparing us for what's to come. His timing is designed to perfect us, refine our faith, and teach us patience. When we trust that he is working behind the scenes, even when we don't see the results immediately, we allow ourselves to rest in his sovereignty. This deep trust in his timing opens our hearts to hearing him more clearly, because we stop trying to force things to happen on our own, and instead we align ourselves with his will and his timing. God's timing teaches us about patience and perseverance. While waiting for him to speak or act, we are called to remain faithful, knowing that he will reveal his plan at the right moment. This process deepens our reliance on him and allows us to grow spiritually. We begin to learn that God's timing isn't something to be feared or resisted, but something to embrace with faith. Trusting in his timing means that we are not only waiting, but actively engaging with him, trusting that he will direct our steps when the time is right. When we surrender our own timelines and place our faith in God's perfect timing, we open ourselves to hearing his voice with greater clarity. We stop rushing, stop worrying, and allow his direction to unfold in his perfect moment. Trusting that he knows the right time for everything brings peace and confidence, and it helps us recognize that his timing is always worth the wait. In conclusion, hearing God clearly is a journey that requires intentionality, patience, and trust. It begins with developing a deep relationship with God, where communication flows freely beyond the confines of rituals or religion. Silence plays a pivotal role in this process, as it allows us to tune out the distractions and create the space needed to hear his still, small voice. Understanding our purpose aligns us with his will, making it easy to recognize his guidance and discern the path he wants us to take. Obedience is the pathway to deeper understanding. Each act of obedience brings us closer to God's voice and his plan for our lives. And above all, faith and trust in God's timing remind us that he speaks when the time is right, and we must wait on him with patience, knowing that his timing is perfect. As we cultivate these practices in our lives, seeking relationship over religion, embracing silence, understanding our purpose, walking in obedience, and trusting his timing, we will begin to hear God more clearly. His voice will become a guiding light in every decision, every moment, and every step of our journey. Let us commit to listening, trusting, and obeying, for in doing so, we will experience a deeper connection with God and his clear direction for our lives.